yourself. A lot of people know who you are and your background in bodybuilding, but for some of the people who might be new to the sport, they might not know. Could you just shed a little bit of light on your background in bodybuilding and where you come from?
All right. I come from a small town in Pennsylvania, Ephrata, Pennsylvania. I started my training career almost exactly 30 years ago at the age of 11. I can remember very, very clearly. I was at a local newsstand with my mother, and while she was off shopping, I was looking over a vast array of magazines, and after a period of time, my attention became arrested by the sight of a bodybuilder, of course, on a muscle magazine cover. I grabbed it, and there was an instantaneous love affair started. I've been doing it ever since, actually off and on. I started competing at the age of 18 in local physique contests, which I did very well in. I won my first contest, which was the Mr. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania contest. Not long thereafter, I went to the state level and won the Mr. Pennsylvania. Not long after that, I went to the Mr. America, the AAU Mr. America in 1971, and placed 10th in that behind Casey Viator and others. Casey was first that year. Not too long after that, I injured my right shoulder quite severely while training and was forced to lay off for several years. In late 1974, I started back training. I should say resumed training. And went into competition again in 1975, at which time I entered the Ifbb Mr. America in Los Angeles, where I placed third behind Robbie Robinson and Roger Callard. That motivated me quite a bit, and the next year I trained very, very hard, came back to win that contest, the 1976 Ifbb Mr. America. In 1978, I won the Ifbb Mr. Universe, or World Championships as they're now called, with the first and only perfect score in history.
Wow.
In 1979, I won my first pro contest, the Southern Pro Cup in Florida. Did well in several other professional contests, then won my weight class at the Mr. Olympia in 1979, placed second to Frank Zane overall.
So they used to have weight classes in the Olympia.
Right.
Under 200, over 200, or?
Yeah.
And you won the over 200 weight class in the Mr.
Olympia? I won the over 200 with a perfect score.
Wow, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. An interesting bit of history.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, in 1980, I placed fifth at the Mr. Olympia, a contest that I and almost everyone else who witnessed it was convinced was fixed, and as a result decided to drop out of competitive bodybuilding.
Really? Now that was the year that Arnold won it back in Columbus. Was
That was in Sydney, Australia in 1980.
Oh, okay, but and that was Arnold's comeback year.
Right.
Okay. Huh. And you were so frustrated by that you just stepped out of competitive bodybuilding.
Well, frustrated in that I came to see quite clearly that there was corruption involved, that evil was not something you merely read about in newspapers and novels, that it's all around us.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, I had a glimmering of certain facts that led me to believe there might be something like this going on, but I wasn't so certain. This brought it all into focus, and I didn't want to be involved or associated with people like that, and decided to drop out.
Wow. What about, what have you been doing since then? I know you've stayed close to the sport, though.
Right. In 1983, I left Los Angeles, where I worked for Joe Weider and his Muscle and Fitness magazine, to go to Florida to work for Arthur Jones at Nautilus.
Okay.
I stayed there for a relatively short period, only 6 months, which is quite interesting, actually. A year or two prior to that, I said to an old friend of mine, I wouldn't mind working for Arthur Jones, if only for 6 months, to get to see how his mind works. As it turned out, it was only 6 months, and I left his employ. Went to Europe, performed numerous exhibitions and seminars, came back for a short period, actually a year and a half, I published and served as editor of my own magazine, Workout for Fitness, which was a more general fitness magazine, softcore bodybuilding magazine, as I called it.
Right.
That went under, and I went back to work for Weider as a writer. And then 4 years ago, in addition to still writing for Joe Weider, I started my own personal training business, which started out quite slowly. I bring that up for those listeners who might be considering starting their own training business or who are having trouble now. I was quite surprised that it did start out very slow. I thought that with my visibility and name recognition, I'd move into that business and it would be a spectacular success right from the outset, but it was not. The first 4 or 5 months, I only had a few clients and was on the verge of giving up when all of a sudden it just started paying off for whatever reason. It started to flourish, and I've been quite happy with it. Now, 4 years later, it's better still, in part as a result of my continuing my articles in Flex and Muscle and Fitness, and also as a result of several top bodybuilders finally recognizing that heavy-duty, high-intensity training not only works in theory, or is not only true in theory, but that it works in practice. People like Aaron Baker, David Dirth, David Paul, Lee Labrada, and last but not least, the most gracious and the greatest of all, Dorian Yates. I say gracious because prior to winning his first Mr. Olympia last year and since, he's been very kind to give me a good deal of credit. I found out just recently that after this last Mr. Olympia, at the breakfast seminar the next day, he talked quite a bit about me. Apparently he was motivated to start training as a result of having seen my photographs, having read my articles, bought and read my books. Not only was he inspired by the image of my physique, but he was brighter than the average bodybuilder. As a result of having read my books and articles, he came to understand the theory of high-intensity training, recognized its validity, used it, and went on to win European, British championships, Night of Champions, and now the 1992 and 93 Mr. Olympias.
Right.
So many people who may have been wary, skeptical, even openly hostile to the theory of high-intensity training are now not so much so. They're saying, geez, maybe Mentzer was right, or at least he was on to something. If it worked for Dorian Yates and Casey Viator and Ray Mentzer, there has to be something to it.
Right. Well, I want to talk in detail about that. I have a couple of questions that come to mind. And first of all, I'd like to second your comment on Dorian Yates. He is a really bright bodybuilder. The guy is very articulate, and he is really a gentleman.
Very much so.
I met him just last week down at Club Metrex, Dr. Conley's gym down there, where Chris Lund was shooting some photos, and he is a really a neat guy. And I've been around a lot of bodybuilders just like you have, and guys like him are pretty rare. So
yeah, I was just going to say that, Bill, he is quite rare. Not only is he brighter than the average bodybuilder, he's got a great attitude. He's benevolent, he's amiable, he's open and accessible to fans. He doesn't have this attitude that he's superior by virtue of having bigger muscles than anybody else.
Right.
He's a human being.
Yeah, I agree all the way. Now, you talked about the corruption in bodybuilding that really soured you on the competitive aspects of the sports, and then you said that you worked for Weider for a few years. Are you saying that the